Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Meriwether and Tharp. So good to have you with us. Such a lot to do on the show today, too, by the way. Terrence Edwards stops by. A lot to discuss with him as the Dogs go through practice here before the start of the upcoming season. Interesting stuff from Kirby Smart today on the situation for Georgia at running back, including some praise for a Georgia running back by a respected voice. We'll hear some very interesting breakdown from Georgia defensive coordinator Dan Lanning about the need to replace a departed star who put up some big stats a year ago. And I want to begin the conversation today with a topic on JT Daniels that I think is going to be a lot of fun. So let's do it all right now. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. It's presented by our friends at Meriwether and Tharp, and you know everybody over there is looking forward to the start of the upcoming season. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Meriwether and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I want to begin the show today with a description of what I find to be the most annoying topic in all of sports. And I'm going somewhere with this. There's a reason why I'm going to connect this to Georgia football in a moment. But here's the annoying topic that, frankly, at first blush has nothing to do with college football or Georgia or anything else. You guys are baseball fans. You watch baseball at all. And you know why I like baseball? There's this controversy that erupts when someone hits a home run and flips the bat, or when a pitcher strikes a guy out and he kind of stares him down on the way back to the dugout, and kind of some of the I guess the swagger that certain players like to play with. And when anything like this happens, and it's always like these unwritten rules of baseball about, you know, guy hits a grand slam when the team's up 10-0, he swings the 3-0 pitch, or like weird stuff like that. There's always like backlash against stuff like that, and then there's like backlash to the backlash. And the reason why I find that topic to be so annoying is because I think people have a tendency to overcomplicate something that its base level is actually pretty simple. That when it comes to like some of the brash way in which certain players play the game, stomping on home plate after they score a run, you see that in college baseball all the time, or flipping a bat in the major leagues, or staring down, or, you know, taking a long time to trot around the bases, things like that. Here's the simple truth about those kinds of things when it comes to baseball, for those of you who care about that sport at all. You like it when it's your guy that's doing that, and you hate it when it's somebody else. That's just the simple truth. And it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. If Ronald Acuna Jr. is on your team and he's doing those kinds of things, boy, you love to pass him the way that he plays the game. If Fernando Tatis Jr. is doing that against your favorite team, you feel like he's showing you up and he's, you know, being too cocky, too arrogant, or whatever else. That is just sort of human nature. You like your guy to have a lot of passion and energy and maybe even a little swagger. It makes you feel good. It's certainly entertaining, and it kind of irritates you when it's somebody else, and sometimes sports is just not any more complicated than that. Now, here's my reason for bringing all that up, is because I think we're about to see some version of that for Georgia this upcoming season, and as it plays out, I think it's going to be pretty fascinating, because this is not really the kind of thing, at least to my memory, maybe y'all can remind me, but this is not the kind of thing that we've seen around Georgia very much. Now, all of that is to say this. I'm about to make way too much of an Instagram post. So let me go ahead and warn you at the very outset here that I'm going to read a lot into a relatively small and, short Instagram post, but I find it to be pretty fascinating. It comes from Georgia quarterback JT Daniels. If you're watching on video, I'll show it on the screen, and if you are a radio or podcast listener, I will do the best that I can to describe this to you. Can we see JT Daniels here from Instagram? And just for a second, I hate to do this to my friends at Meriwether and Tharp, but can we take this off just so people can see this? So Daniels is flexing, and he has the kind of smile on his face that I'm not even quite so sure I'm capable of conjuring a smile that looks like that. There's the confidence that it takes to have that kind of half smile that's almost not a smile. Like, you have to really know how to pull that off. And the caption that Daniels provides is showtime, which is essentially obviously a look ahead of the upcoming season. Daniel's feeling pretty good about himself. Now, you can put our friends at Meriwether and Tharp back on the screen. I don't mean to take away their opportunity to be on display here. The point is, Daniels kind of gives the flex, and it gives you the showtime caption for all of this. Now, here's the thing that I thought about. I don't believe that I've ever seen anyone in a non-ironic way give you the muscular pose that Daniels gives on Instagram. And by the way, he's in great physical condition, so you certainly feel great about that. I don't know that we've seen anyone, in my lifetime anyway, kind of give you in a non-ironic fashion that sort of muscular pose that wasn't a heel wrestler. And I mean this completely serious, that the kind of look that Daniels has on his face, the kind of way in which he flexes for the camera there, it sort of reminds me of something like the late, great Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff would have done back in the 80s when he was feuding with Hulk Hogan. There's a certain degree of he's just finished cutting a heel promo and telling people why their hometown's not any good. And all of a sudden now as the music's playing, he gives you the flex on the way out the door there. And to tie this back to what I said a moment ago, this is one of those things that Georgia fans are going to love all season long. Assuming Daniels stays healthy and assuming that Daniels, does everything this year that certainly seems not even like the highest end projection for JT this season, just the more reasonable, in line with, common expectations performance from Daniels this season. Georgia fans are going to eat all of this up because JT does seem to have a genuine level of swagger that, some people just don't quite have it in their DNA to do that. The way in which he rocks the turtleneck with the chain. Like, that's not an easy thing for everybody to pull off, but Daniel's comfortable enough in his own skin that he's able to do that. Comfortable enough in his own skin that he's able to give you the muscular pose on Instagram with the tease towards showtime on the field this upcoming season. And I said before, Georgia fans are going to love this because a lot of the best Georgia players in recent years have really been pretty mild-mannered, right? I mean, guys like Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, Roquan Smith, great players in the 2017 team. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but seeing them flex on Instagram, even though they obviously all had the physiques that would have given them the right to do that, doesn't really seem like they did that kind of thing a lot. Previous Georgia quarterbacks also a little more quiet, a little more reserved. That some of Georgia's best players recently have actually been guys who are fairly mild-mannered. JT Daniels, now, when it comes to like giving interviews, things like that, he always has a team-first attitude, and he's actually pretty good at running the parallel track of self-confidence while also deferring to the team concept. So he gets that part of it right, but that's not the part we're talking about right now. We're talking about the other part of it. That Daniels just feels really comfortable, kind of feeling pretty good about himself and giving you a little bit of a smirky smile that kind of seems to tell its own story. Gives you the flex there a little bit the way that maybe in the past not every Georgia player would do. And as I said before, while Georgia fans themselves are going to love this, y'all, and you already know this before I say it, but I'm about to say it anyway, opposing fans are going to hate JT Daniels. They are going to hate him. I don't even think they know yet. Auburn, Florida, Daniels didn't play against those teams last year, right? Daniels played most of his games in, relatively obscure conditions, late in the season against Mississippi State, late in the season against South Carolina, late in the year in December against Missouri, bowl game, against Cincinnati that, got pretty good TV ratings. But once again, maybe not the kind of thing that all the Georgia rival fan bases were kind of, really leaned into. I mean, SEC fans know who Daniels is. That's certainly true. But I don't think SEC fans necessarily know what Daniels is like. And when JT's doing the kinds of things in the football field that he's also doing on Instagram right there, you better believe that opposing SEC fans are going to hate him. He's going to be the major league player that hits a home run and flips the bat. He's going to be the major league pitcher that strikes you out and stares at you on the way back to the dugout. And when it's somebody else on a different team that's doing that, in sports, we're just human beings. We don't like that kind of thing. If some other quarterback this year behaves that way towards Georgia, you better believe we won't like that. But when JT Daniels does it, boy, there's a swagger about that you just love the passion with which he plays the game. That's just the way that human beings are, and there's really very little we can do to be different than that. That's just kind of a normal reaction. And I think that Georgia fans are actually going to kind of eat up the idea that Daniels is out there cultivating some of that attention. Sometimes it's just kind of fun to wear the black hat, right? I mean, go back to professional wrestling for a moment. It's good to cheer the good guys, but every now and then it's kind of nice to cheer the bad guys too. Frankly, sometimes when I'm watching Star Wars, I sort of cheer for Darth Vader. I mean, sometimes it's just kind of cool to cheer for the bad guy a little bit. And Daniels, I think, is very comfortable being the bad guy in the eyes of some of the teams that Georgia's going to be playing against this season. I don't necessarily think that's going to be a bad thing. And here's the other thing, too. And as I said before, I've given you the warning already that I'm making way too much of an Instagram post. I fully acknowledge that going into this. But here's the other thing that must be considered. That the self-confidence that Daniels puts on display, I think, also serves a purpose. Now, I want to let you hear here for a brief moment Kirby Smart from SEC Media Days back in July. And I think that kind of at least demonstrates partially the ways in which and the why of which that someone like Daniels being self-confident might actually help him just a bit. Let me let you hear Kirby, and that'll set us up for where we want to go next. This is the UGA coach.
I'm excited to see what he can do this year. I think his growth has been more physical than mental. Although you're always growing as a quarterback mentally because you get experiences, he's a guy that's played a lot of football between high school, USC, and our place, but he's gotten his knee in better shape. He's gotten more mobile and can move a little bit, and I think he's got a lot more confidence, and he's got a better relationship with the players around him.
So listen to that from Kirby Smart there, especially the part about the physical rehab of the knee. And put that in connection for a moment to what Daniels himself talked about recently in the interview with Marty and McGee on the SEC Network about how while he was recovering from that knee injury, that he was actually, I don't think he used the word depressed, but I can't think of a different word to use. I don't want to, use a clinical term wrong, but he was just kind of down in the dumps about the fact that he was, having to go through all of this, and he wasn't able to be out there and doing the things from a football standpoint he wanted to be able to do. And, along the way to getting better, along the way to feeling good about yourself again. I mean, what do you tell young athletes all the time? For those of you who are youth coaches, things like that, you just tell them, hey, go out there and have fun, right? I mean, I coach like youth sports all the time, and I'm constantly telling the young kids of, when they're trying too hard or getting too nervous or anything like that, hey, just go out there and have fun. Go out there and have fun. I don't know that the advice is necessarily all that different for a guy like JT Daniels at a much higher level of the game, the biggest level of college football it provides. I think there's something to be said there as well of the cure for what ails you sometimes is just going out there and having fun, being yourself, being your authentic personality. That means having your own personal style with the way that he dresses. That means your own personal style in terms of the way that you kind of smile at the camera as if you know something the rest of us don't know. That to me is Daniels having fun. And Georgia fans are going to love it. Opposing fans are going to hate it. But that kind of demeanor from the quarterback here ahead of the start of the upcoming season could be a little bit of a precursor there as well. And it's hard not to think about this. A little bit of a precursor to a quarterback who does feel fully comfortable in his own health, in his own skin, in this Georgia offense. And that combination could equal some big things in the field later on this fall. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Good to have you with us no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and of course all of it brought to you by our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. So happy to have them with us there too. For those of you that are checking us out, by the way, on the pages of DawgNation.com, right at the top of the page at DawgNation.com, we've also got a fun announcement coming up for you very, very soon about a really cool thing that we're going to do on that video platform. This is actually one of the cool things that we've done in a while, so I'm looking forward to being able to tell you more about that as time moves on. Of course, radio and podcast, always fun to be able to deliver on those platforms there as well. We just really appreciate you being here. More than 1,500 shows now for us, and we've got big plans for several thousand more in the years to come. So thank you so much for being a part of it, and we would not be able to do it if not for our friends like those at Merriweather and Tharp. Your source for Georgia divorce. Bob Tharp, one of the partners there, his wife Ashley, big-time dog fans. They love UGA. They love the Georgia football conversation. Very excited about the upcoming season. In fact, they're going to be with us for DawgNation Invasion there as well. But they also know that during the week, they've got to take care of serious business too. And the business that they do is certainly serious because they help folks going through the divorce process. That's the kind of thing that you got to really think about, right? Because if you find yourself on the doorstep of doing this, the thing that you should probably know is the person on the other side of that relationship that's now severed, they probably have a plan, right? So it's important that you have your own plan. It's important that you have a plan that's designed for you personally by expert lawyers who've been through cases like this thousands of times before. Even if your situation is specific to your own circumstances, which it obviously is, the institutional knowledge that my friends at Merriweather and Tharp have gained can still be put to the task for you and put to work for you of helping you make the next season of your life better, more enjoyable. That's what Merriweather and Tharp can do for you. They'll give you a free initial consultation that'll help walk you through all of this. And then when you make the decision to hire them to go to work for you, they are going to restore your finances, relationship with children, all the things that really matter in a situation like this. Merriweather and Tharp understands it all, and they're here to be there for you through it all. It's theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's the website, theatlantadivorceteam.com. Make sure you check out my friends at Merriweather and Tharp. All right, coming up in just a little bit of time, It will be our buddy Terrence Edwards. A lot to talk to with Terrence Edwards about here today as the Dogs in the practice field getting ready for the upcoming season. The idea of potential breakout players in the Georgia roster, that continues to be a hot topic. Terrence, I'm sure, will have some intense thoughts on all of that. We will do that with him coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, I do want to go around the doghouse here today. It's presented by our friends at Servpro, and I want to look at the other side of the ball just for a moment. We did offense and JT Daniels a moment ago. I want to look at the Georgia defense here for a moment, too, because I'm continuing to unpack some of the things that Georgia defensive coordinator Dan Lanning said during a very revealing press conference the other day. And I like the way in which Lanning answers certain questions. He was asked by our buddy Mike Griffith about the need to replace Azeez Ojulari. Ojulari, after all, statistically speaking, the most successful edge rusher of the Kirby Smart era. Ojulari had 8.5 sacks a year ago. That's the top single-season performance for Georgia when it comes to sacks since 2016. And now in his absence, there are legitimate questions about who steps up, who takes the place, who fills the void created by Ojulari, who had so much success a year ago. And Lanning, to his credit, is willing to talk about all that. And he's willing to mention the names that Georgia fans want to hear and discuss the ways in which that this could be a big season for those guys, much the same way it was for Ojulari a year ago. I think you're going to really like this. This is Dan Lanning talking about how Georgia can maintain the pass rushing momentum that Ojulari helped it establish a year ago. Here's the Georgia DC.
Obviously, Azeez provided a lot of consistency for us in a pass rush standpoint, but his success also limited maybe some other guys' opportunity on the field. So we know, obviously Adam Anderson's skill set and his ability to rush the passer. I think it's going to create some opportunities for guys like Nolan Smith, Robert Beal that have been sharing some of those reps in the past. And then Trayvon Walker, I expect, really big things to show up with him, and excited about some of the young guys that kind of come into the fold. And I think we will continue to adapt defensively about where we create pressure, where we create those one-on-ones. Maybe that means there's going to be some more one-on-ones inside rather than, out on the edge. But I feel confident we've got the guys that can replace some of that production for Azeez, and also excited to see what Azeez does at the next level for the Giants.
Boy, it just sort of feels like you'd spend 20 minutes talking about what Dan Lanning says in that clip alone. First of all, he mentions Robert Beal. That's also a guy that, if you remember, when we had Ojulari on the show back in April, he mentioned Robert Beal there as well as someone that he thought could also be a part of that big pass rush formula for UGA this year. Obviously, it's Adam Anderson and Nolan Smith, who Georgia fans are really looking forward to hearing as much from as they possibly can this season. And I think it's nice that Lanning says, at least he alludes to the idea of, hey, maybe those guys, had they been in the role that Azeez was in last year, maybe they could have had some of that statistical success because of, the kind of raw talent they bring to the table. Maybe they could have already done that, but last year Azeez was just doing what he did, and therefore, he didn't use this word, but I'll use it for lack of a better way of saying it. They were just kind of blocked. That when a guy like Azeez is doing what he's doing, that creates less opportunities for other players. Also interesting to hear Lanning mention Trayvon Walker in that discussion. That echoes something that Kirby Smart said in the early stages of spring practice, that Trayvon, as a defensive end who kind of occupies a little bit of an edge rusher role for Georgia, that he's going to be a part of this pass rush. Lanning alluding to some of that pass rush sometimes coming from up the middle in the interior, which makes you think, as it's been discussed in other places, that maybe Jordan Davis is a three-down player for Georgia this year as he tries to really solidify a first-round pick type resume in his final year at college. All of it, I think, is really fascinating. And it also all builds to the notion that for the Georgia pass rush to be as good as it can be this year, I don't think that requires any one guy getting some gigantic sack total. Certainly not 15 sacks, something along those lines, and maybe not much more than double digits. It'd be nice to see a couple guys knock on the door of getting 10, but what it's really about for me, for the team, is finding a way to get a team total that kind of moves in the direction of being somewhere near 40. If you kind of averaged out Georgia a year ago for a full season, they could have gotten to that total. And I think getting to a total like that here for the upcoming year is pretty important there too. And obviously the huge level of talent that Lanning describes there is one of the big reasons why that might be able to happen. Really good stuff from the Georgia defensive coordinator. And if you want to hear the entire press conference, or Todd Monken, who's coming up today, you can go to the DawgNation YouTube page and watch all those press conferences right there. That is really good stuff all the way around. And that is Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Servpro. And listen, we've all, at least those of us who are homeowners, have had some sort of experience with this where you see some damage to your home, right? Commonly caused by water intrusion or fire, things like that. And when you see that picture, there's so, nervousness about that you wonder, well, what's ever going to happen with my home? And here's the thing I can tell you. When it comes to the restoration specialists at Servpro, they can get your home back like new, literally like the damage never even happened. That's what they're famous for. That's what they're well known for. When water or fire damage strikes, you can call on Servpro to help you immediately, and they will literally restore it for you truly like it never happened. The other good thing about Servpro is all the franchises are independently owned and operated. That means you're doing business with folks who are, family, run type business, which is always a really good thing to be able to do. Their cleanup and restoration specialists are ready to do the work for you. If you're dealing with some damage around your home, they can help you take care of all of that. Very easy website to remember there as well. Just simply go to servpro.com. That's servpro.com. SERV is the way you spell it. Servpro.com. Let the restoration specialists of Servpro get your house back to new like it never even happened. All right, it's great to have you here on DawgNation Daily here today. So much fun stuff on the way. We're going to talk to Terrence Edwards here coming up. After that, some big news around the SEC. And before we're done today, also a look at what one SEC network analyst is saying about a Georgia player who could truly be on his way to a breakout season. This is going to be fun. We'll do that here coming up in a few minutes. But for now, everything happening with UGA, what to expect in the practice field, and then the game itself once it kicks off the 2021 season on September 4th against Clemson. Let's talk to our buddy Terrence Edwards right here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to Terrence Edwards here. Always great to have him as a part of the program, what we're doing here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And Terrence, as I say good morning to you, I'm reminded of things you've said in the past about JT Daniels as a leader and the value that comes when you're getting that vocal leadership from your quarterback. But a moment ago, we also kind of highlighted some of the confidence that Daniel seems to show. And Smart himself has said that he does feel like JT is more confident now because he's maybe feeling healthier, certainly than he felt this time a year ago. But is that the kind of thing that a team can also feed off of when your quarterback is willing to play with a little bit of swagger, when your quarterback is willing to, just kind of set the tone from an emotional standpoint for a team, even beyond just absolute leadership, but, making it okay to have some fun, making it okay to embrace everything that's about to happen for the Georgia Bulldogs? How much can a team feed off that energy when the quarterback provides it?
The team will definitely feed off that. When the quarterback is in JT Daniels' situation, I think you're exactly right. He's finally 100% healthy, I believe. I think he feels like the old JT Daniels, and I think once he exudes that confidence, team around him is going to feel that confidence. And once your leader and who is your quarterback shows that swag, I mean, it's like a cancer. It swells and it just generates through the whole team.
And when you think about Daniels and the knee injury that he's come back from here, I mean, I think it's probably hard for us who've not been high-level athletes in that spot to probably process what it means to, certainly be way healthier than he was year over year. But I would say, on the basis of kind of what we've heard from other people, even healthier than he was at the end of last season when he was actually starting to play some games, that time spent, not just learning how to be a player in the Georgia system, but also just get a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more mobility. Those are things for Daniels that will probably matter this season. Not to say he's going to be running around like Lamar Jackson, but just the idea that, he does trust his mobility just a little bit more. I mean, to me, Terrence, it seems like that can only help.
Oh, most definitely. Once you trust your body, then you could go out there and play free. You could go out there and play with the mindset that I could go out here and do things that I probably didn't think I could do last season. They just run around a little bit, and not let alone his physical condition. I think his mental condition is much better, where he understands the offense better, what Todd Monken is trying to achieve. So he could go out there and be that coach on the field. I tell guys all the time, if the quarterback and offense coordinator is lockstep in arms, that's when the offense can explode. And I just feel like now with a healthy JT Daniels and understand what Monken is trying to do, now his physical and his mental is at a 100%. He could go out and just play carefree.
So Georgia has started practices, and you see some of these videos that kind of creep out from time to time that Georgia shares, and at the end of one the other day, there was a tiny glimpse of Eric Gilbert looking to go through a drill, and a lot of Georgia fans are just dying to kind of hear how that's going for him, what the practice has been like. People want to hear rumors. They want to hear reports. They want to hear some of this kind of stuff, especially for an anticipated player like that. Some Georgia fans feel like it's been a little quiet in relationship to Gilbert's early days of Georgia practices thus far. Have you spoken to Gilbert recently? How is he getting acquainted to practice life there at UGA, and how are things going right now? Anything you can tell us on that front?
I haven't had a chance to speak with him. Just let him settle in, and I'll get a chance to talk to him later on. But now I'm just allowing him to be who he is, go out there and be the player that we know he could be. I can tell you this: I spoke with a guy yesterday, and the word around is he is as good as he's advertised.
Wow!
So I haven't spoke to him, but this is someone I was talking to me about him, and they know he's good as advertised. Is that me?
Boy, that's certainly great to hear. One of the things we heard Kirby say the other day was kind of getting acquainted with maybe some new terminology, things like that, as you move into a new offense. What is that like for a wide receiver? For those of us who not only don't have the physical skills to go out and play this position, but also haven't had to learn playbook and the things that wide receivers are asked to do. What kind of learning curve is there, not just for Gilbert, but for a freshman coming into this program, or really anyone who steps on this field for the first time? How much is there to learn for a pass catcher out there in an offense like Georgia, and how quickly are they certainly expected to kind of absorb all of that?
Well, there's definitely a learning curve coming from, in Eric's case, coming from being a true tight end now to being a true wide receiver. Verbiage is different. There's a lot of checks. There's a lot of route adjustments that you have to learn. There's hand signals you have to learn. So just give you an example, a dig route in man in zone is different. You can't run a man dig in the zone coverage and vice versa. So you got to go out and understand coverages from the wide receiver spot in Eric's case. And then you just got to get on page with your quarterback. He has to get on page with the way Kirby coaches and runs practice instead of Coach Oger run at LSU and the way they run practice. So there's a lot of adjustments from these young men, and he's still a young man, and I think we forget that. He's talented, but still a young man trying to figure things out. But I have no doubt that he will, and I think he will help us win games this year, especially making a few plays against Clemson. So his talent is undeniable. Now he just has to figure out everything else that goes along with it.
Cole Kubelik from the SEC Network recently tabbed Georgia running back Kendall Milton as one of his, top breakout player in the SEC for the upcoming season. Terrence, you watch this league closely, and you obviously watch the Georgia players closely there as well. If I were to ask you, regardless of position, who are some names in this Georgia roster right now that you could see being big breakout performers? Who do you have your eye on right now?
Kendall is one of them. When I got opportunity to go watch the Georgia practice, I think he's probably the best back that we have right now with the size, the speed, the vision. He isn't as fast as James Cook, but he is a big kid with great vision and runs with power. So he's definitely going to be one that I think will break out. And I'm going to go probably the untraditional route here. I'm going to go with an offensive lineman. I'm looking for the guy that I know very well, Jamari, to hopefully go back to his natural position as left guard, and got one of the young guys to step up at left tackle, and maybe that's Sims. So I'm going to go with a young left tackle, whoever that is, to allow Jamari to go back to guard, probably his more natural position.
Boy, that's great answers on both fronts right there. Georgia obviously starts the year at the coaches poll, 5th in the coaches poll on that list of teams that have the closest, best chance of winning the national championship right now. If you're a Georgia player or just an observer of Georgia, what do you feel about Georgia in comparison to teams like Ohio State and Oklahoma, Clemson, Alabama, those rated ahead of it? Big matchup between number 2 and number 5 to begin the season. What did you think of Georgia coming in at number 5 in that coaches poll to kick things off here?
I think as a player standpoint, that is all. In my opinion, we're right where we need to be. I think that's a good spot. We got Clemson. A lot of it don't matter. We don't have preseason games to really see what teams are made of. I think we're going off in these polls of who's coming back, how many starters that got come back. And I think Alabama, rightfully so, should be number one, but they're ranked off reputation. We
Sure.
have a quarterback that's breaking in a new quarterback. Yes, I think Nick is the GOAT in college football, but you never know what these teams are going to look like because you don't have preseason games to play, so we don't get a look at them. So we right where we need to be and just continue to stay afloat, take one game at a time, and I think we will be fine.
Terrence, always such great stuff. We appreciate your insight here on the program, and I love the work that you're doing. You mentioned the PACE Academy program, but also as an individual coach there as well, getting folks ready for the next level. You got guys signing scholarships all the time or making their commitments all the time, and I love to see that. How can folks get in touch with you if they want to learn what you're teaching? How can they do that?
You can find me on all social media at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy. That's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Terrence, great stuff. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp here today. Look forward to seeing you soon. Also back on our DawgNation postgame show again later on this fall. That's going to be a lot of fun. Terrence, great stuff. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, I think what Terrence says about Georgia there is actually pretty interesting. We talked about this in SEC Country Live a little bit yesterday. Our friends at BetUS, if you look at their odds to win the national championship, no surprise Alabama is plus 250, which is essentially 2.5 to 1. Clemson next on that list at plus 350. But if you look at the teams that are rated ahead of Georgia in the top five, Ohio State and Oklahoma, the other two teams that are rated ahead of Georgia, Georgia actually has shorter odds to win the national championship than either Oklahoma or Ohio State do. Georgia's at 5 to 1 to win the national championship, plus 500 according to BetUS. And if I was thinking about my own national championship bet, I mean, I'm not going to outright pick Georgia to win the title this year. I don't believe I'm going to pick anybody to outright win the national championship. But if I was making a bet, I mean, I think I would probably put a bet down on Georgia. I'm certainly not going to take Alabama 2.5 to 1, right? I'm just too contrarian to do that. The odds-on favorite to win the national championship is typically not going to be my pick. I'm also not going to make a pick on Oklahoma either, even though I do think the Sooners were playing a pretty good brand of football by the end of last year. The truth is, it's like we've seen that version of Oklahoma in the playoff now 3 times against SEC teams. They've lost all 3. I just can't take them seriously as a national championship contender. So what does that leave me with? It leaves me with Georgia. It leaves me with Ohio State. It leaves me with Clemson. In the case of Ohio State and Clemson, 2 teams that are breaking in full season starters for the first time. I guess from that standpoint, Georgia's also breaking in a full season starter for the first time in JT Daniels too. And so if you, just for the sake of conversation, are saying, hey, no Bama because, just too small of odds, number 1, seed type team, ignore them, ignore Oklahoma because of what we've seen them do in the playoff in the past, start making that comparison between the other teams there at the top. The Clemsons, the Ohio States, I mean, why not Georgia? I mean, I guess that's kind of what it comes down to. No obvious reason why it will be, but certainly no obvious reason why it can't be. We got more SEC through stuff coming up here in a moment. Before that, though, let me remind you about my friends at Marco's Pizza. Pizza lovers certainly get it when it comes to Marco's. The great, authentic taste that Marco's Pizza provides. Really great, crispy golden crust. The melty cheese is there on top. And one of the things, and come Thursday, I'm kind of always thinking about the weekend that's on its way. One of the things I also love there as well is the great savings you get with Marco's Pizza right now. You can, swing by and pick it up, or you can have it delivered right there to your door. How about this great savings? A bundle that includes a large one-topping pizza, a pizza bowl, and cheesy bread. It's all just $21.99 right now. That's just $21.99. You get all of that. You can go to the Marco's app or marcos.com to find out a lot more details on that. Pizza lovers get it. Of course, participation may vary. You can find additional restrictions that apply. See sort for details on that, but marcos.com or the Marcos app to find a lot more about that. All right, SEC through. Let's bounce through a few stories here for a moment. Bad news for Auburn. Another story we covered for you in SEC Country Live yesterday. 2-year starter along the defensive line right there at the nose position, Tyrone Truesdale, has entered the transfer portal. This being reported on Twitter here this week. I'll show you the tweet from the Rivals account that says that he's a 2017 3-star, as a grad transfer. 67 tackles, 3 sacks over the course of his career there at Auburn, and the start of the last 2 seasons. This is a big guy, 6'2", 299 pounds, occupying the middle of that Auburn defensive line. There's no scandal here. He's not in trouble, at least not that anyone understands. In fact, he's been universally praised as a pretty good guy. He's also a recent Auburn graduate. Hard to imagine how this is good for Auburn not to have a guy like this who has been a multi-year starter, now not a part of Derek Mason's defense in his first year as Auburn defensive coordinator, his first year for Brian Harsin there as head coach. This would seem to be a pretty big loss. One of the things that comes up, and our buddy Mark Morris asked about this in our YouTube comment section yesterday, well, we're kind of past the transfer deadline to notify a team and be eligible to play somewhere else right away. And so it certainly seems like if Truesdale's going to play immediately, listen, I'm not a stickler for the rules. I get the rules wrong frequently, but I think I'm right about this, that if he's going to play this year, he's going to have to drop down to like the FCS level or something like that to be eligible. But it's probably less of a story of what's next for Truesdale as opposed to what's next for Auburn. Needing to replace a starter along the defensive line, not the kind of conversation you're going to be having this late into the process. Another first-year coach, Josh Heupel, trying to get things going there at Tennessee. Interesting stuff recently from Kirk Herbstreit talking about the concern that he would have if Tennessee gets off to a slow start, basically saying you got to beat Bowling Green week 1. And as we said yesterday, if you're forced to say, boy, Tennessee's in a must-win situation against Bowling Green, that gives you an idea of just how dire the scenario might be for Vols fans through this upcoming season. They've also got Pitt week 2, winnable game, but certainly not a guaranteed win. And then obviously some challenges after that. Once you get into that SEC slate for Tennessee, they got a crossover game against Ole Miss. Ole Miss was ranked in the coaches poll. I think most of the SEC East games, I don't think you could really circle any of those for Tennessee as an obvious win. Maybe the Vanderbilt game at the end of the season, but I would say no other game in the East for Tennessee right now is one that I'd even favor them to win. I think that Tennessee's one of the 3 worst teams in the SEC. There is apparently, though, a little bit of movement potentially on the Vols roster here for a moment. Brian Maurer, one of the Tennessee quarterbacks, put on Instagram. That post has since been edited, but his caption was that the Vols apparently, or somebody, he says they, took my dream after 4 days. That's okay, because I'm a soldier, he says on Instagram. Hashtag 18 out. That was the Tennessee quarterback, and he was not spotted at a recent Tennessee practice. I think some people have taken this to mean that maybe Brian Maurer is now about to leave the Tennessee program. It's a guy who's played some for the Vols. And I guess here's my thing. You can't have 4 guys in a quarterback competition, right? You got Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton, the 2 recent transfers from Virginia Tech and Michigan. Harrison Bailey, the former 4-star quarterback from Marietta. Bailey may be the guy that if Tennessee was really smart, they'd actually lean on here because that's a guy who they recruited out of high school, and that's the kind of guy that you can build your program around, I would say. If Heupel was smart, I think he might pick Bailey as his starting quarterback and say thanks but no thanks to the 2 recent transfers. But one way or another, that trio would seem to be the guys who are the most, I guess, ready to compete in all of this. You can't have 4 guys. You can't split the snaps up that way. So I hate it for Maurer if this is the way that his time in Knoxville is going to end, if that's indeed the case. But at a certain point, you just only have so many practice snaps to divvy up to truly find out who your best guys are. Matt Stinchcomb, the former Georgia great offensive lineman, the brother of our good friend John Stinchcomb, was on SEC Now this week on the SEC Network, and he tabbed his top receivers in the SEC. I thought this was interesting because of the fact that a couple of the names at the top are not really the more well-known names maybe in this league. He's got Traylon Burks from Arkansas at the top of the list, and Nia Smith from Texas A&M at number 2. Then you get to John Mechie III from Alabama and Keyshawn Butte from LSU coming up after that. I mean, I think it's interesting to have someone other than Mechie at the top, just given the fact that the Alabama receivers in recent years have been so good, and there's been so much buzz about Mechie being the next in that line. But credit to Matt here a little bit for willing to kind of go off the page a bit with Burks and Smith, and obviously in the case of Texas A&M, who I think has a lot going for it. The one question I have had is, how dynamic can the Aggies be in the passing game? Well, if you've got a guy like Smith who's ready to play as well as Matt Stinchcomb says he's going to play, that could be a big boost there in College Station for that. We'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, speaking of SEC Network analysts rating things, it was interesting to see on Twitter the other day, Cole Kublik from the SEC Network list his top potential breakout performers for the league here this year, and certainly very interesting to see at the very top of that list, Georgia running back Kendall Milton. He's got Milton ahead of Mookie Cooper, the Missouri wide receiver, Cole Taylor, the LSU tight end, and then a couple of other wide receivers, E.J. Jenkins from South Carolina and Javarius Johnson there from Auburn. Interesting to hear Terrence Edwards a moment ago say that he felt like, based on the practice that he got a chance to witness back in the spring, that Milton really was the most talented runner on this Georgia roster. A lot of Georgia fans seemingly think the same thing. And listen, I'm still a big fan of Zamir White. I'm kind of a contrarian on this, in which the more and more people go towards the running backs we've seen less of, the more I kind of lean on. I kind of think that Zamir may still be in line for a pretty good senior year. Admittedly, though, that's kind of the minority opinion amongst a lot of Georgia fans right now. One way or another, though, whether it's big year from the upperclassmen like Cook and White or a breakout year for a guy like Kendall Milton, the Georgia offense all the way around just needs more explosive runs than it had in 2020 and really to a degree in 2019 there as well. Kirby Smart actually talked about that a little earlier this week. This is what the Georgia coach said about that at the time.
I don't think our backs are any less talented last year or this year in terms of being able to have explosive runs. We haven't had as many, and you have to say, okay, well, why is that? And a lot of it has to do with the way people are playing us. How can we make them pay for playing us with extra people? And then how can we block their extra people at the second level? We've had probably just as many 7, 8, 9-yard runs, but we haven't had the explosive we've had in the past. Most people would point to sheer speed of the backs, but that's not the case. With our guys are just as fast now as they were when we had the other guys. We haven't been as explosive, and a lot of that is breaking tackles on the second level and being able to block downfield, get the second hit.
When Smart was talking about that this week, he also went into more detail about how you get those blocks in the second level, talking about previous Georgia receivers who've been good at that, and also talking about the way in which RPOs now, the run-pass option, where the quarterback has a chance to hand the football off or throw the ball down the field, that receivers in kind of an RPO situation aren't quite as set up as well to block as they used to be before. Think about how good J.J. Holloman used to be at some of those downfield blocks, saying that some of the explosive run stuff for Georgia requires, better downfield blocking. It's kind of interesting from Smart. I mean, I think if the trade-off is less explosive runs for more potential for explosive pass plays, that's probably a pretty good trade-off all the way around. But either way, one way or another, seeing this Georgia running game show some of that explosiveness, the way it was kind of the hallmark for this program in 2017, 2018, obviously that'd be a good step forward for the team here this year. Very quick Golden Shoe winner today. Daniel Jones shows me this from Oconee Middle School. The golden shoe they give out to their track team, that's actually really pretty cool. I'm glad to see that's so closely resembling our golden shoe here. Daniel, thanks for sharing that. We'll make you a golden shoe winner for today. And our Gator Hater Countdown, how about 79 days from right now? Dogs get a win against those lousy, stinking Gators. Can't wait for that. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Great to have all of you with us. And, of course, our reminder to check out R.S. Andrews for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. It's one of the things that you can count on from R.S. Andrews. Hope you'll find them today. Let's dive in here and get a few comments, and hope everybody's doing well. I believe we started on Facebook yesterday, so I'll go YouTube first here today. And just good to have all of you with us for all of that. All right, on the YouTube side, Center Point Media says UGA should be beating teams not named Clemson or Bama by 10 to 14 points easily this year. Yeah, I mean, Center, if you want to go back to the high water mark of the Kirby Smart era at Georgia 2017, and that was really the hallmark of that, SEC's competition. Georgia's winning all those games by 14 or more points. Really, for 2 years, 17 and 18, Georgia won all of its division games by 14 or more points. And that is a valuable asset to have. When you're not being challenged in most of the games you're playing, it theoretically ought to give you a chance to really load up the games that truly matter more than others do. And I don't think it's being too greedy to say it like that. HR picking stuff on the subject of USC coaches that have ended up in the SEC. Yeah, you got a few of those. Kiffin and Orgeron, Sarkisian, even T. Martin. That's certainly true. DGD Podcast, thank you for the kind words on our 1500th show. Appreciate that. Foster Moss says we need some of that swag that the U had back in the early 2000s. Yeah, so I think I'm going to play this for you tomorrow to go along with that. There was a video the other day that got shared of Bill Belichick, and this is, to me, really fascinating because you may have seen this in the NFL as of late. They're about to crack down on taunting. Like I talk to like a I mean, people don't necessarily like, really aggressive taunting, but people also don't really like very legalistic interpretation of those taunting rules. And so there's been some controversy related to the fact that the NFL has let it be known that they're really going to kind of tighten the screws on that this year, cracking down on any kind of thing that can be defined as taunting. And so the video that got shared the other day was from Bill Belichick, and I believe Ben Watson has said this was from a player meeting that he was a part of, that when Belichick's showing these video clips, and basically as a coach, and you'd argue that Belichick is the best of them, as a coach, Belichick says that he knew his team was the most ready to play when they were celebrating big, slapping helmets and, doing kinds of things like that, when they were, basically behaving as Daniels kind of behaved in his own Instagram post that we talked about a little earlier. That he said when you've got a guy who makes a play and nobody's running over there to celebrate with him, when none of that kind of stuff's going on, Belichick kind of questioned how ready his team was to even be a part of the game. But when there is a lot of that, as the commenter described, kind of the Miami from the early days swag, when you've got some of that kind of stuff, what Belichick himself said. Now, Belichick's opinion obviously matters in this because he's such a great coach. But Belichick himself has said that's a team that shows a readiness to play that actually is demoralizing to the team they're playing against. That to me is really interesting. That is very, very good stuff, and I think relevant to the conversation that we're having. Rodney Hewitt says, it's crazy to me that Clay Webb isn't even being talked about in the Too Deep. I can go two ways with that. Obviously, I get why people have their attention on Webb because he is a former 5-star. I think in the case of Webb, look, I would say it's too early to say, well, I guess this just means Clay Webb's never going to be a player, because the fact is, while he may not be on the Too Deep, it's not like there are duds on the Too Deep, right? I mean, Georgia has more than 10 impressive-looking offensive linemen, and so if Webb's not cracking the Too Deep, it could be a statement as much about who is cracking the Too Deep as it is for who's kind of, not, what Webb's not doing. Honestly, I have no idea what's going on with him. I know there were, rumors at one point in time, things like that. I mean, the only thing that I'll say is, this seems like revisionist history, I realize, so I'm hesitant to even say it, but when Webb was coming out of high school, it's not like he was as big as the other guys that Georgia was recruiting. And so, how does that factor into what's going on here? I think that, and some of y'all may even know this better than I am, I think that he's kind of made that transition to where now he's probably considering himself more of a guard than he is a center. Center's become a really important position in college football. I mean, in the NFL, there's a lot of chatter about, center being even more important than the tackle positions at times now because of all the responsibilities that a center has. And, the pathway towards playing at guard may just be a little easier. And it sounds like, that may be what he's kind of considering doing right now. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it is noticeable when the former 5-star's not, cracking that lineup, or in light of a Warren Erickson injury, not really even being one of those guys talked about. I mean, frankly, a guy like Austin Blasky's probably been more relevant in that discussion than what Webb's been as of late. I won't pretend to know what it means. I also won't condemn Webb on the basis of this and say, well, I guess that means he's never going to play. Jim McLaughlin says, are you concerned about the COVID outbreak up here in North Carolina? I guess not so much as it relates to the game itself, although, some of y'all know I'm a wrestling fan. I mean, when they announced that SummerSlam was going to be in like Vegas, this was going to be full crowds and all back to normal. And now there's at least a mask mandate back again in Vegas. So some of the big events that have been announced have been slightly amended. The truth is I'm not really fully sure of what's happening in Nevada, but I do believe that was at one point in time supposed to be a full crowd with everybody just enjoying the event per normal, has now at least turned into a masked situation. I mean, the one thing I'll say about the COVID stuff is, and I don't like to talk about it, but because I like to be a distraction from that kind of stuff on the show, that's just where I view my job as being. It's important for some people to talk about it. It's not important for me to talk about it. But the one thing that I've just personally experienced lately is the same way that back in early part of the year, late part of last year, where you're just hearing those personal stories. You're just seeing, it's not just the stuff that's on TV. It's not just the, statistics. It's the actual personal encounters with this. And I'm hearing that kind of stuff again. So opinions about who should do this and who should do what, or what should happen here, what should happen there. I can promise you I'm not going anywhere near any of that because you don't care what I think, and this isn't really a platform for you to say what you think. But in terms of the fact that this is unfortunately still really impacting people, and I'm reading these stories, I'm knowing people who are describing sad things. That's happening again, and I hate that. And so I hope that changes soon, and I don't really quite know what's going to take to make it be the case, but I'm definitely hearing that again. Let's see. A lot of folks weighing in with some good stuff. PSOM1 on the comment section mentioning Keely Ringo and Lewis Seen. Yeah, I'm looking forward to both of those. Enrique Murillo mentioning Keely Ringo being a freak. Yeah, I mean, for a while there, it sort of seemed like people were selling their Keely Ringo stock, which I thought was kind of weird because I never sold a dime of mine. I never sold any of my Keely Ringo crypto. I mean, I've had my Ringo crypto the entire time. I've never relinquished any of that, for sure. For sure. Frank Hilton on the subject of Webb there as well. DMart42 says when it comes to guys like Webb, sometimes it just doesn't work out. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, sometimes it just doesn't. And sometimes there's not even a great reason as to why. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. But I think in the case of Webb, I think it's still probably also too soon to say that it's not going to. Let me go over to Facebook here for a little bit. And we'll probably do about five more minutes of comments or so. All right, over here on the Facebook side of things. Chad Williams says crypto is fake currency. I mean, honestly, I'm not a big crypto investor. I'm just trying to use the parlance of the moment here. Brian Lindsay says, well, what do I have to do to get a top fan badge? The honest truth is, Brian, I have no idea. Facebook gives them. Facebook takes them away. We don't really know why they do what they do. So I have really no idea. There's very little logic behind any of that, to be honest with you. Scott Harris says the best UGA downfield blocker, Hines Ward. Yeah, I mean, I think pound for pound and kind of like a punt pass kick style competition. If we just had a contest for all the things that football players are asked to do, I think pound for pound, and hear what I'm saying here, pound for pound, Hines Ward may have been about as good a football player that's come through Athens. He was just good at everything. He could throw the ball. He could obviously run the ball, catch the ball. He was just an absolute unbelievable blocker, just devastating downfield blocks. Loved the physical part of the game. I mean, he could have played a dozen positions. I mean, he could have played so many positions. Obviously goes on to a great NFL career there as well. Hines Ward was just really good at football. He's kind of like the guy you went to high school with who over the course of the season just kind of eventually plays every position. I'm not even quite sure. Hines could have lined up at nose guard at some point in time and, he just was sort of just good at everything. Hines Ward was very, very good at football. Greg Childers says Champ Bailey was about the same, except he didn't play quarterback. Yeah, Champ was. He was very good receiver for Georgia in '98. Very good receiver. Let's see. Jamie Huff says Keely will be our starting star next year. Kimber and Green are our corners. I will tell you, Nyland Green's another one of these guys. And I said this on one of my vacation shows. I feel like people are sleeping on Nyland for sure. I feel like they're sleeping on him. So Jerry Poppins in here. So Jerry yesterday was mad at me, and I didn't quite understand why. So Jerry, if you want to put that back in the comment section, I would love to hear that because you're one of our great commenters, and I don't want to anger you. Brian Whitehead said he listened to the Lewis Seen interview. Very impressive young man. Yeah, I like Seen a lot. I like what Seen has to say about his own game, what he says about others. It's pretty obvious that Georgia's had this pedigree of leaders from the safety position. J.R. Reed to Richard LeCount to Seen now. It is really obvious that baton has been passed to Lewis. Of the players who spoke the other day, I would say that that Seen was about as good as any of them for sure. For sure. Yeah, there you go, JT. Oh, look at that. How about that? That's really funny. putting my face over the JT Daniels thing. Yeah, that's pretty funny all the way around there. Listen, I wish I had those kind of guns for sure. I also wish I had as much. I mean, honestly, if you told me I could have JT Daniels hair or JT Daniels, flex right there, I believe I might take those long flowing locks. That's what I believe I might take. But maybe I've got a little smirk the way that Daniels kind of has that. Maybe so. That's pretty good stuff all the way around there. Very, very entertaining. I'll take that for sure. Epic Robinson was happy about our guest lineup on SEC Country Live yesterday. It's always important for me to make Epic happy. Oh, I like this. How about Randy Hall? You can tell that Randy's a professional commenter because he's working sponsors into his comments. He says, we need to create so much havoc this year that the Dogs have to call Servpro to come clean up the damage. Randy, that is a pro. You are a pro's pro all the way around. I like your football take, and I love the fact that you worked in sponsor. And honestly, somebody a moment ago said what most impressed me about some of the early press conferences we've gotten from Georgia. I mean, the fact that Lanning, his language is just dripping with havoc, right? I mean, some of this kind of stuff is a mindset. I'm really influenced by this by our buddy Chuck Smith, the former Tennessee Vol and former Atlanta Falcon. I like to think of him as more a former Falcon than a former Vol for obvious reasons. But, Chuck, longtime friend of our show, been on with us many times. And, Chuck has always tried to instill that when he and I have talked about this kind of stuff, that pass rush is a mindset. You got to be committed to it. You can't just be committed to, as Chuck maybe has said in the past, you can't have a defense that's committed to protecting your defensive backs and then expect to get after quarterbacks. And if you want to get after quarterbacks, you got to get after quarterbacks. You got to put, talented edge players into the backfield if that's what you want to be able to do. And to me, go back and, it's on our YouTube page. Go back and watch the whole press conference. Lanning's language just drips with this sack quarterbacks, tackle for loss. He was asked specifically what were his expectations for Trayvon Walker. He mentions tackles for loss. Like, that's the kind of thing you got to get negative plays, right? Because when you play Clemson's going to get positive plays. I mean, the expectation for Georgia against Clemson is not to hold them to 9 points. They're just not. Clemson's going to have DJ Uiagalelei. He's doing Dr. Pepper commercials for a reason. Justin Ross is back, we're told, healthy again now. They're going to score points. They're going to move the football some. So how do you win a game like that? You got to get a stop when you can. How do you get those stops? Get a negative play. Take a minus 15 on somebody, minus 12 on somebody, a 9-yard loss with a sack, or sometimes a tackle for a loss can provide for you. Just any kind of negative play whatsoever can be enough to upend the momentum right there. And when Lanning speaks, that's the words that he uses very, very frequently. Kevin Chapman says, I love it when we have a sack-happy team. Yeah, I mean, I'm always going to be a fan at heart. I don't care how much, professional, coastal elite broadcaster media type stuff that I do. I'm always going to be a fan at heart. And I would say that there is no moment in a game that's more fun in a loud stadium than crowds making noise on defense, the noise kind of crescendos as the play starts, pass rushers getting loose, then you sack the quarterback. I mean, I get chills even thinking about that. That is the single best moment to be in a football stadium for it. More so than touchdowns, more so than anything. It's when the crowd makes noise on defense, you see the pass rusher break through, you see him sack the quarterback. To me, that's the single most exciting play when it's your team. When it's not your team, it's the opposite. But it's the single most exciting play in football. Totally, totally believe that. And I just love it all the way around. Randy Hall mentioning MJ Sherman being healthy now. That's a big deal. Greg Childers also mentions dominant on the ground like OSU did. I know we all want JT to show out, but if UGA wins the Clemson game, it's going to be because of the running game. I'd say especially late, right? I mean, what you can do late in the game by salting it away with a good running game, that's what NFL teams, certainly are looking to do. How about Joseph Kennedy going after Cody Ledoux? That's really funny to me. That's really funny. Adam Brooks says, between the JT and Cook picks from practice, it looks like the Dogs haven't messed around in the weight room this year. Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing you don't have to worry about, right? I mean, I'm just amazed at how scientific all this is these days. Perfect meal specifications. It's really the food these guys eat that gives them the best leg up and stuff like that. A typical 20-year-old in the, same stage of life is just not getting the kind of nutrition they're getting. Forget the workout, which they're obviously getting great workouts, but a lot of y'all have been trying to add muscle mass for a long time. It's just sometimes it's just hard to do, right? You got to get the right kind of protein to be able to do that. And that's what the nutrition scientists and people like that at UGA are able to do. Somebody says my new wrestling name would be Havoc. Yeah, there you go. I like that. Sam Hazeltine wants to know when the concession stands are open. They'll be cranking out here pretty soon. Devin Loper concerned about the Georgia offensive line as a reason for the lack of explosive runs. Could be that was the case. I mean, last year was also, I think, a year of transition for the Georgia offense. I mean, this is a team that is now changing, right? They are going to a little bit different style of offensive line, a little bit different, certainly style of offense. The one thing I would challenge you on, though, is that in 2019, people forget this. DeAndre Swift is still here, Sam Pittman's still here. That was not a great Georgia rushing attack in 2019. Not the way it had been in 2017, 2018. They took a big step back that year. At a certain point, Georgia's inability to be multifaceted on offense has actually hurt the Georgia running game. I think 2019 is a big example of that. Keith Finney says, who do you think will have the most fans, UGA or Clemson? I mean, Georgia's never going to get outdone in any kind of stadium environment like that. But it kind of reminds me of the Rose Bowl a little bit. I remember in 2017, Georgia obviously had the very famous takeover of Notre Dame. And being in L.A., and I was there for a week prior to the game, being there in L.A., I mean, it just looked like a total Georgia takeover, right? It's like there are Georgia fans everywhere. I don't think I ever saw an Oklahoma fan anywhere in Los Angeles prior to the Rose Bowl. And you just sort of had the sense that Georgia was just going to take over the stadium. And there probably were more Georgia fans than Oklahoma fans at the Rose Bowl. But when you got to the game, there were a lot of Oklahoma fans. They were cheering for their team. They were making noise. They were doing everything that a good college football fan was supposed to do. And going into the week, you didn't see any evidence around town that was going to be the case. This could be one of those things where you have the same thing happen in Charlotte where it's like everything kind of gives you the indication that, hey, Georgia's going to have the big tailgates. The Georgia fans are coming up from Georgia. A lot of Clemson alumni live in Charlotte as it is. So my guess is both fan bases are well represented, but obviously Georgia's going up there to hopefully not lose the game and definitely not lose the party. Let's see what else. Over here on YouTube, back for a moment. We got to get ready to go after that. Mike D says, Mike D says he's getting plenty of protein. No, I remember that picture. Mike fills out that T-shirt pretty well. That's always a good thing to be able to do. Mike, I got no problem with that whatsoever. You're doing a good job in that regard. Matt Presley says expectations for the secondary. Interested to hear who we expect to stand out and be a leader. Well, Matt, as we mentioned a moment ago, I don't think there's any doubt that in the safety core here, and that ends up being kind of a leader for the entire secondary, that Lewis Seen really has the look and feel of being a leader right now. And, I hear good things about Chris Smith, too. Smith is one of those guys that I had a chance to meet a couple of times during his recruitment, going, back at from his days there at Hateful Charter. And, this was a guy that what really impressed me about him, speaking of adding, mass and adding some muscle, is he'd actually started that process for himself even before he got to Georgia. This is a guy who obviously, a little smaller than some of the guys we sometimes mention around here, but it's almost like he's used those doubts, the fact that he might be too small. Seems like he's kind of used those as fuel. He's always kind of reminded me like the welterweight champion of the world in boxing, the kind of guy who may not be as big as some, but carries that weight really well and, kind of just has a little bit of an edge about him, which I think is really cool. Tough dude. And I think when you're thinking about leadership in the secondary, I think you have to think about Smith there as well, because in light of the LeCount injury a year ago, to step in and become a starting safety on this team was not an easy thing for him to do, just given how much talent there was in the program. And just, everybody wanted the spot that Smith got a chance to occupy a year ago, but he earned it. And I get the sense that he's now ready to build on that going into the new year, which is pretty fun there too. Let's see what else. DMAR42 says, do you have more questions about the secondary, the outside linebackers? Love our starters, but little depth at outside linebacker. Yeah, I mean, I guess my big question is, how are those guys going to be used this year, and can they be as effective as Ojulari was? And on the depth part of this, I'm also kind of interested in, a guy that we don't talk about as much as a guy like Xavier Sori, right? But, Sori is a big-time guy, right? I mean, so I am a little bit curious to see how, guys like MJ Sherman now being back healthy again, how he helps fill out that depth. Does Georgia seem like it's actually a little deeper at outside linebacker at some point in time based on the kind of contribution you're able to get from guys like that? I'm pretty curious along those lines. And we had somebody in the comment section a moment ago mention Smile Mondin, who I believe is an inside linebacker, but the chance that somebody like that also gets tabbed to maybe do a little outside stuff every now and then too, I guess I'm kind of interested in that maybe too. Jay Shipes having internet issues. Sorry to hear about that, Jay. Michael Pfeiffer says a loss for either team will be devastating for either team. Yeah, I mean, Michael, I think you and I are kind of on the same page on this, is that I actually think there's a lot more on the line for Georgia-Clemson week 1 than is commonly assumed. It's not impossible to bounce back from that. I've heard some people say that even bet on the losing team to win the national championship because they feel like they're going to get better odds. Maybe that's the case, but I think, largely speaking, big picture that, for Clemson, who does not play another ranked team, at least right now, preseason ranked team, on its schedule after Georgia, the Georgia game is important in that discussion. And, for Georgia, who we've seen Georgia be left out of the of the college football playoff on the basis of a close loss in the SEC title game. It'd be great to build a playoff resume before you even get to the SEC championship game. That's what the Clemson game would provide for in that situation there as well. Rodney Hewitt also thinking about outside linebacker in 2022, and that's one of the reasons why guys like Sori and Sherman and guys like that will be so heavily discussed. I guess there's also the possibility that Georgia, could look to the transfer portal for that, but you'd like to not have to do that, right? You'd like to be able to find your own guys there on that. Foster Moss says, what was it like being on the field in the Rose Bowl when Sonny ran that game-winning touchdown? It was really just one of the most amazing things that it's ever happened for me. And really, arguably speaking, from a sporting sense, probably the most amazing thing. To think that it was this great game, this great venue, I'm lucky enough to be standing right there for it. It was almost just more than I could take. It was just so overwhelming. And I happened to be on the Georgia side of the field, on the Georgia sideline when it happened. It literally happened right in front of me. It's one of those things when I watch the video highlights of it, I'm always looking to see if I can find myself there. Thus far, I haven't really been able to, but it was amazing. There's also the weirdness of, hey, we're trying to get some video shots of it. One of the guys I was working with at the time, we're trying to get video highlights of it so that we can use, for some of the things that we're doing, not the play itself, but the aftermath, the celebration. We got to get back into the bottom of the stadium to do a post-game show. There's just so much that goes on with all of this. And, you're in the midst of a life-changing sporting moment, but you're also at work, which is kind of a weird thing there too. So I just will never forget it. I'll also never forget, Kirby Smart was furious in the locker room after the game. Postseason games are different than regular season games in that, media just goes right into the locker room. It's almost like an NFL type thing. NFL media goes into the NFL locker room. For the most part, college media does not go into the college locker room, but in bowl games, it's always been different. At least pre-COVID it was. I think last year was not quite the same way. But pre-COVID, the locker rooms are open after these big games. And Smart, I think intuitively knew at the time that Georgia had the national championship game coming a week later. This is a weird schedule where normally you have multiple weeks in between the playoff and the national championship game, but given the fact that January 1st was a Monday, the national championship game was the following Monday, and Georgia was all the way out in California having to get back home, and Smart, boy, he was trying to get the media, as you might imagine, out of that locker room and get everybody back on the plane. He was trying to get home as quickly as he could because he, even though he had not been a head coach at Georgia before, had been a part of national championship runs at Alabama, and he knew what a short week he was going to have to get ready for that game and didn't want to waste any time. That's one of the other things that really stands out to me in the aftermath of that was just how intense Smart was in that locker room postgame. Jake Shipe said, did Facebook crash? I don't think so. I don't think so. All right, we got to get ready to go. Randy Hall says we need to beat Alabama this year. We'll be better next year. I think so. Chad Carson also wondering JT being able to stretch the field and get behind the DBs will force teams to put more guys in the secondary. Yeah, open up the running game more, Chad. I absolutely do believe that. I think that's really the missing piece for Georgia offensively is to create that conflict amongst defensive minds, defensive coordinators of, do I put guys here? Do I put guys there? And, it's just a tough choice for defensive coordinators to make, and that's the kind of thing that Georgia's pushing opposing defense staff to consider. I think you're absolutely right about that. DMart42 says, I just want to beat Bama while Saban is still there, and I understand where you're coming from, and I guess, DMart, that's probably my viewpoint on that there as well. Either way, we appreciate you being here for our R.S. Andrews podcast Cool Down today. Also remind you to check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution at ajc.com. Boy, what a night last night for the Braves. And I kind of find myself right now thinking a little bit like what I thought for the Hawks run back in the spring. Not to say this is going to happen for the Braves, but there was a certain moment in the NBA season where you kind of realized for the Hawks that, hey, this is really happening, that this is actually something is going on here that kind of matters. And I think for the Braves, we may have achieved that last night, right? They had a big lead against Cincinnati. Will Smith completely implodes in the ninth inning. Reds come back to tie it. We go deep into extra innings, and then Ozzie Albies for the Braves comes up, hits the game-winning walk-off home run. Phillies also lose to the Dodgers, and suddenly the Braves now find themselves tied atop the National League East with another game against Cincinnati today, like late. It's like a weird 5 o'clock start. It's crazy start time for Braves and Reds today. But it's a chance for Atlanta to get a sweep against Cincinnati, who's actually probably been a better team this year than some realize. This is one of those moments in which the Braves season to me kind of changed a little bit last night. It's not a Braves show. I'm just telling you, you can read more about this online at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, that every game the Braves will now play for the rest of the season seemingly now matters more on the basis they found a way to scrap and get that win last night. So if you haven't been paying attention, I think, and you are a Braves fan, if you're not a Braves fan, obviously you don't care about any of this, but if you haven't been paying attention, I believe now is the time to start paying attention to what's going on there. And as people mentioned before, paying attention to the COVID situation, both in North Carolina where Georgia plays week 1, but across our state there as well. These are still significant challenges, and it's important to know what's going on with all of that. Also, there's some news related to Music Midtown coming up and how the pandemic is impacting that, including vaccines and things along those lines. Also, really, really good stuff from the recent Hall of Fame induction. Our buddy D. Orlando Ledbetter was up in Canton for all of that. He'll tell some personal stories about that coming up this weekend in the print edition of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, so a lot of good stuff. Also, Sunday is the debut of the Super 11. Y'all know we love high school football around here at DawgNation, and the AJC Super 11, one of the great traditions when it comes to high school sports around our great state, will be debuting on Sunday there as well. So ajc.com for a lot more on that. Thanks for being here for the R.S. Andrews podcast. Cool down. Y'all check out R.S. Andrews online. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can find them. They'll show up. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. Check them out today. R.S. Andrews at rsandrews.com. We'll see you tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then.